Hi, this is NextGen Picks. Let's be honest for a moment. There is absolutely nothing worse, and I mean nothing, than dragging a massive 75-inch TV box through your front door, breaking a sweat mounting it on the wall, finally sitting back with a bowl of popcorn, hitting play on a big-budget movie, and realizing you just dropped $2,000 on a giant, dull gray slab. At 55 inches, buying the wrong TV is frustrating. At 75 inches, it's a full-blown catastrophe, one that completely takes over your living room. The 2026 marketing hype machine has gone completely off the rails, slapping AI-enhanced labels on panels that barely belonged in 2022. They want you overwhelmed. They want you shopping by the biggest words on the box. Today, that stops. I've stress-tested these oversized screens to find the only 5 models that actually deliver a true cinematic experience this year. And I'm also calling out 2 so-called bestsellers that are nothing more than traps for your wallet. Before we get into the hard data, if you appreciate reviews that put your money ahead of brand partnerships, smash that like button and subscribe to NextGen Picks right now. It helps signal to the algorithm that honest, independent testing still matters. All right. Let's get into the deep dive. We need to talk about why 2026 is such a strange year for the 75-inch market. For years, 65 inches was the grown-up choice, while 75 inches was the luxury upgrade. But something changed over the past 12 months. Manufacturing of these massive glass panels has finally leveled out, and suddenly, flagship technology, the stuff once reserved for $5,000 Halo TVs, has trickled down into the 75-inch sweet spot. But there's a catch, a big one. Because 75 inches is now the volume seller, brands are getting sneaky. They're recycling old 60 Hz edge-lit panels, slapping a shiny 2026 model badge on them, and hoping you don't notice that at this size, every flaw is amplified tenfold. On a 55-inch TV, a bit of backlight bleed is an annoyance. On a 75-inch screen, it turns into a glowing white cloud that destroys every dark scene in the Batman. That's why this year, my testing focused heavily on panel integrity. Can a TV actually illuminate a screen this large without turning into a patchy mess? So let's start with the one everyone is going to push on you, the LG C5 OLED. Now, if you followed the channel for a while, you know I've been critical of LG's incremental upgrades, but the 2026 C5, specifically the 77-inch version, is finally where the value equation makes sense for about 90% of buyers. Here's where it gets weird. LG finally brought the brightness booster technology down to the C series in a meaningful way. In my lab, I clocked this thing hitting over 1,400 nits in a 10% window. For an OLED, that is screamingly bright. We're finally at the point where you don't need to live in a cave to enjoy an OLED. But the real truth bomb here isn't the brightness, it's the new Alpha 9 Gen 8 chip. Look, AI is the biggest buzzword in tech right now, and usually it's total fluff. But on a 75-inch screen, upscaling is everything. If you watch a lot of sports, standard cable 720p or 1080i signals on a screen this big, it usually looks like a muddy, pixelated nightmare. LG's new processing is the first time I've seen 1080p content look like native 4K without that waxy, over-sharpened look that makes everyone's skin look like plastic. And gamers, this is your king. We're talking 4, count them, 4 full bandwidth HDMI 2.1 ports. Most premium TVs from Sony or even some Hisense models still only give you 2 high-speed ports, and one of those is usually taken up by your soundbar. LG gives you 144 Hz support across the board. If you're a PC gamer or you're planning on whatever pro consoles are coming next, this is the only one that is truly future-proofed. Is it perfect? No. The sound is it's thin. LG's AI Sound Wizard tries to compensate by virtualizing an 11.1.2 channel setup. But let's be honest, you're buying a 75-inch flagship TV. If you don't have at least a decent soundbar, you're doing it wrong. Also, the stand assembly, it's a nightmare. The manual looks like it was translated into 3 different languages and then put through a blender. But overall, for the price-to-performance ratio, the LG C5 is the benchmark. It's the one I tell my own family to buy when they want that wow factor without crossing the $3,000 mark. Before we move on to the next beast on the list, I want to hear from you. My team and I spend hundreds of hours in the lab, but we want to make sure we're testing what actually matters to your living room. What's the one product category or specific piece of tech you're currently on the fence about? Drop a comment below and let me know. I read every single one, and it's how we decide what to buy for the next round of testing. Alright, if that LG felt a little safe for you, let's talk about the Samsung S95F. This is for the person who wants to see colors that don't actually exist in nature. This is a QD-OLED, and if you haven't seen one in person yet, it's hard to describe. While the LG uses a white backlight through filters, the Samsung uses a blue OLED layer to excite quantum dots. The result, color volume that is just, it's offensive in a good way. When you're watching a movie like Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, the reds and greens on this panel pop with a purity that the LG just can't match. But the reason it's number 2 on my list for 2026 isn't just the color, it's the glare-free 2.0 zero coating. Samsung did something impossible here. Usually to get deep blacks on an OLED, you need a glossy screen, but glossy screens act like mirrors. If you have a lamp behind you, you're going to see it. Samsung's new coating is matte, but, and here is the magic trick, it doesn't wash out the blacks. In a room with floor-to-ceiling windows at 2 p.m., this TV still looks like it's in a dark theater. It's the first OLED I've ever tested that I would actually recommend for a sun-drenched Florida sunroom. Now, I know what you're thinking, NextGen picks. If it's so bright and the colors are better, why isn't it number 1? Here's the stuff they don't tell you in the manual. Samsung still refuses to support Dolby Vision. I know, NextGen picks. Does it really matter? Yes. In 2026, almost every major streaming service, Netflix, Disney+, Max, use Dolby Vision to tell the TV exactly how to display each frame. Samsung forces everything into HDR10+. It still looks great, but you're missing that last 5% of director intent. Also, Samsung's Tease OS has become, well, it's a billboard. Every time you turn the TV on, it's trying to sell you a cloud gaming subscription or a free TV channel you'll never watch. It's cluttered. It's slightly sluggish compared to LG's WebOS. And it feels like it was designed by a committee that loves ads more than they love movies. But I have to give them credit for the One Connect box. If you're wall mounting a 75-inch TV, the last thing you want are 4 thick HDMI cables and a power cord dangling down your wall. Samsung puts all the brains in a separate box. One tiny, almost invisible wire goes to the TV. It's a cable management dream. If you're a hardcore PC gamer, the S95F also pushes things further with a native 165 Hz refresh rate. If you've got a top-tier RTX 50 series or 60 series card, the fluidity on a 75-inch screen is basically life-changing. It makes your living room feel like a high-end arcade. Now let's pivot. If the Samsung is the sports car of the TV world, the Sony Bravia 9 is the luxury sedan. It's refined, it's expensive, and it's doing something completely different. See, Sony looked at the OLED versus mini LED war and basically said, why not both? The Bravia 9 is a mini LED TV, but it's using what they call the XR backlight master drive. In plain English, it has thousands of tiny dimming zones that are controlled with such precision that it almost mimics the perfect blacks of an OLED, but with the searing brightness that only a backlight can provide. I measured this thing hitting nearly 4,000 nits. That's not a typo. 4,000 nits. When you're watching a scene with a flashlight or the sun hitting a chrome bumper, the Bravia 9 actually makes you squint. It's the closest thing to real-life brightness I've ever seen on a consumer display. But here is where Sony always wins. The XR processor. Sony's secret sauce has always been how they handle motion and noise. If you watch a lot of older movies, think 35mm film transfers from the 70s or 80s, other TVs try to clean the grain and end up making it look like a blurry mess. Sony understands that film grain is part of the art. It keeps the texture, keeps the soul, and just makes it look like it's being projected in a high-end cinema. Here's where it gets weird though. For a TV that costs this much, Sony still only gives you two HDMI 2.1 ports. It's 2026, guys. If I have a PS5, an Xbox, and a high-end PC, I'm constantly playing musical chairs with my cables. For a $3,000 plus TV, that is a massive oversight that almost feels like a slap in the face to the consumer. But look, I'll be honest with you, not everyone has $3,000 to drop on a luxury sedan, and this is where the 2026 market gets really exciting or really dangerous. The next two on our worth it list are the ones that are currently scaring the life out of Samsung and Sony. We're talking about the Hisense U8QG and the TCL QM8K. These are the spec sheet monsters. On paper, these TVs should cost double what they actually do. We're talking 3,000 nits, thousands of dimming zones, and high refresh panels for under $1,800. But as your partner in this, I have to tell you what the TikTok reviewers won't. There are ghosts in the machine here. With the Hisense U8QG, the hardware is incredible. The brightness is there, the pop is there, but their software, it's hit or miss. I've had 3 different firmware updates in the last month alone just to fix a bug where the local dimming would pulse during dark scenes. When it works, it's a 9 out of 10. When the software acts up, it's a 5 out of 10. You have to be willing to tinker with this TV. And then there's the TCL QM8K. This is the light cannon. If you want a 75-inch TV that can light up a stadium, this is it. It has more dimming zones than almost any other TV on this list. But, and here is the real-world data, their AI upscaling is about 2 generations behind Sony and LG. If you feed it a high-quality 4K Blu-ray, it looks spectacular. If you're watching a low bit rate stream of a football game on a Sunday afternoon, you're going to see macro blocking. Those little square artifacts in the shadows on a 75-inch screen. Those squares are the size of postage stamps. So the question is, are you a clean signal person or a set it and forget it person? Because that choice will save you or cost you about $1,000. These 5, they're the survivors. They're the ones that actually pass the Walker stress test. But before we get into the best overall and best value picks in part 3, we have to talk about the shadow side of the market. Because for every one of these gems, there are 10 pieces of marketing garbage designed to look like a deal on Amazon or at Costco, but they are actually designed to fail or to look terrible from day one. I'm talking about the 60 Hz trap and the fake HDR TVs that are currently flooding the market. If you're looking at a 75-inch TV for under $800 right now, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say next, because this is where the industry tries to pull the wool over your eyes. Look, before we get into the actual winners, we have to talk about the landscape in 2026. If you walk into a big box store right now, you are being lied to. Those demo loops of colorful parrots and slow-moving ink and water, they are specifically designed to hide the 2 biggest flaws of massive 75-inch panels: poor screen uniformity and sluggish motion. When you get that TV home and try to watch a football game or play a fast-paced shooter, that's when the marketing magic evaporates. In 2026, the 75-inch market has split into 2 very different worlds. You have the entry-level giants. These are the $800 to $1,000 sets that rely on brand name alone. And then you have the performance tier, where companies are actually using the massive surface area to give you a true theater experience. The problem is that the price gap between a terrible 75-inch and a life-changing one has shrunk to just a few hundred. That is the danger zone. Let's start with the one that is officially my safe bet for 2026, the LG C5 OLED. Now, I know what you're thinking, NextGen picks. Hasn't LG been doing the same thing for years? Yes and no. For a long time, the C series was the middle child. Good, but always overshadowed by the brighter G series. But in 2026, LG did something that basically ended the argument for most buyers. They brought the micro-lens array MLA light tech down to the 77 in C5. In my testing, this thing hit a peak brightness of 1450 nits in HDR. For an OLED, that is phenomenal. It means those ink black levels that OLED is famous for finally have the punch to back them up. When you're watching a night scene in The Sandman, the highlights, the lanterns, the glowing eyes, they don't just look bright, They look tactile. They cut through the darkness without any blooming or halo effect. That is the OLED advantage at 75 in. And for the gamers, look, I'll be honest with you. This is the most functional TV on the planet right now. It features 4 full bandwidth HDMI 2.1 ports. Why does that matter? Because in 2026, your soundbar takes one, your PS5 takes another, and your Xbox or PC takes the third. Most other brands, especially Sony, are still stingy, giving you only 2 high-speed ports. With the C5, you don't have to choose. You get 144 Hz support, G-Sync, and Frank. It is a seamless experience. But here's where it gets weird, and this is the stuff they don't tell you in the manual. The new Alpha 9 Gen 8 AI processor isn't just a buzzword. On a 75 in-screen, low bitrate content from apps like YouTube TV or older Netflix shows can look noisy. Other TVs try to scrub that noise and make everyone look like they're made of wax. The C5 has this object-based sharpness that identifies what should be sharp, like a face or a car, and leaves the background natural. It's the best upscaling LG has ever produced. Look, I'm putting my reputation on the line with this one. The LG C5 is the best all-rounder for most people, but I want to make sure I'm covering exactly what you need. My team and I are already planning the next 6 months of deep dive testing. What specific products or weird tech niches do you want to see me tear apart next? Is it high-end projectors, desktop monitors, budget soundbars? Drop a comment right now and let me know. I build my testing schedule based on what you guys are actually looking for. Alright, if you watched that LG segment and thought, that's cool, but my living room has 3 massive windows and a skylight, then we need to talk about the Samsung S9 FF. This is a QD-OLED, and it is a completely different beast. While LG uses a white OLED backlight with color filters, Samsung uses blue OLEDs to excite quantum dots. The result is color volume that is frankly a bit ridiculous. The reds and greens on this panel are so saturated and pure that they make other TVs look dusty by comparison. If you watch a lot of animated movies or play high-vibrancy games like Fortnite or Genshin Impact, this is like seeing color for the first time. But the real truth bomb for 2026 is the glare-free 2.0 coating. Samsung did something that sounds like a lie. They made a matte OLED. Usually matte screens look hazy or gray when the lights are off. Not this one. Samsung engineered a coating that traps external light without diffusing the light coming from the pixels. I tested this with a 2000 LLM Studio light pointed directly at the screen. On the LG, I saw my own reflection. On the Samsung, nothing, just the image. And can we talk about the One Connect box for a second? If you are mounting a 75-inch TV on the wall, it is a massive pain to hide the cables. Samsung puts all the ports in a separate box that connects to the TV with one single nearly invisible silver wire. It is the cleanest setup in the industry, period. But what if you don't want an OLED at all? What if you want the IMAX experience? That brings us to the Sony Bravia 9. This is the luxury sedan of the group. It's a mini LED TV, which means it uses thousands of tiny LEDs behind the screen, but Sony's XR backlight master drive is what makes this special. I clocked this thing at a staggering 4,000 nits. To put that in perspective, that is nearly 3 times brighter than the LG OLED. When a lightning bolt strikes in a movie or the sun reflects off water, the Bravia 9 actually makes you squint. It provides a level of impact that OLED simply cannot match. Where Sony wins every single time is motion and processing. Their XR processor handles motion better than anyone else in the game. If you watch a lot of fast-paced sports like hockey or football, the Bravia 9 keeps the ball or the puck perfectly sharp without that weird soap opera effect or trailing that you see on budget sets. It is the closest you can get to a professional mastering monitor in a consumer living room. Here's where it gets weird though. Sony is charging $3,000 plus for this TV, and they still only give you 2 HDMI 2.1 ports. One of those is your EER port. So, if you have a soundbar and 2 consoles, you're already out of luck. You'll have to plug one of your next devices into a standard 60 Hz port, which is an absolute joke for a flagship in 2026. So we have the safe bet LG, the bright room Samsung, and the cinematic Sony. These are the top of the mountain. But what if your budget isn't $3,000? What if you're looking at that $1,500 sweet spot where brands like TCL and Hisense are currently battling it out? That is where things get truly high voltage. Because while these Chinese brands are offering incredible specs for the money, there are some skeletons in the closet regarding longevity and software stability that you need to know about before you swipe that card. Let's look at the value disruptors that actually earned their spot on this list. All right, let's go deeper because this is where the industry really starts to play games with your money. If you're looking at a 75-inch screen, you are looking at nearly 2,500 square inches of glass. That is a massive surface area to keep uniform. Here is the inside secret that most reviewers won't tell you about 75-inch TVs, the ADS panel lottery. In the TV world, there are two main types of LED panels, VA and IPS, or ADS. VA panels have great contrast but terrible viewing angles. ADS panels have great viewing angles but grayish, milky blacks. Now, normally high-end TVs like the Hisense U8 series use VA panels, but for some reason, the 75-inch size is the black sheep of the manufacturing line. Often brands will swap in an ADS panel specifically for the 75-inch model, while the 65 and 85-inch versions get the good VA panels. If you buy the 75-inch Hisense U8 QG without checking the batch number, you might end up with a TV that looks amazing in a bright showroom but looks like a foggy mess during a dark movie at home. In my testing, the TCL QM8K75 actually beat the Hisense this year because TCL sticks to their own HVA panels. That's a high contrast VA. When I put these two side by side in a pitch black room, the TCL's black levels were remarkably close to OLED. The Hisense, while brighter overall, had this faint haze around white subtitles. It's a small thing in the store, but it's the kind of thing that will drive you crazy 3 months after the return window closes. Now, here's where it gets weird. We talked about Sony being the luxury sedan, but I want to explain why you pay that $1,000 premium. It's the bit depth of the backlight. Most TVs use a 10-bit or 12-bit system to tell the LEDs how bright to be. Sony's 2026 XR backlight master drive is using a 22-bit system. What does that mean in the real world? It means gradation. Have you ever watched a sunset on a TV and seen those steps or rings of color instead of a smooth fade? That's called banding. On the TCL and Hisense, you'll see it. On the Sony, it's as smooth as looking out a window. If you are a cinephile, someone who watches 4K Blu-rays and cares about the texture of the film, that processing is worth every penny. But look, I'll be honest with you. For every one of these Elite 5, there's a trap. And we've reached the part of the script where I need to protect your wallet from the big name scams. I know what you're thinking. NextGen picks, it's a Samsung. It's only ballin' $200 for a 75-inch. That's a steal. No, it's a heist and you're the victim. The 2026 Samsung Q7F is what I call a Frankenstein TV. It's built from leftover parts. This is an edge-lit panel. That means there are no LEDs behind the screen. They're only along the bottom. On a 75-inch screen, the light has to travel over 3 ft to reach the center. The result, flashlight effect. In dark scenes, you'll see bright streaks of light shooting up from the bottom corners like a stage play. Worse, it's a 60 Hz panel. At 75-inch, 60 Hz is a disaster for sports. When a quarterback throws a football, you won't see a ball. You'll see a blurry brown smudge with a comet tail behind it. Samsung is banking on you seeing the QLED badge and the $1,200 price tag and turning your brain off. Don't do it. The $1,100 TCL QM7K, a tier lower than our top pick, will absolutely run circles around this Samsung in every measurable metric. In 2026, the software daily grind defines your TV experience. Google TV wins on functionality and search, but it's a resource hog that feels crunchy on cheaper TCLs. LG's Web OS is fast but cluttered with unreovable life hubs, while Samsung's Tizen is a settings nightmare that makes simple adjustments frustrating. Beware the Samsung S95F. Its latest firmware has a major truth bomb bug where Atmos pass-through drops on non-Samsung soundbars. For a stable audio handshake with Sonos or Sony, the LG C5 or Sony Bravia 9 are much more reliable partners. The TCL QM8K is the high-voltage value disruptor with 5,000 local dimming zones and 3,500 nits. It's a light Canon with inky blacks. However, it's a 910 image with a 710 brain due to unpolished software and occasional coil whine. Conversely, avoid the 2026 Amazon Fire TV Omni QLED. Amazon quietly replaced the mini LED backlight with a standard QLED panel. At 500 nits, it's fake HDR. You're paying for a smart assistant and art mode, not a quality display. The final verdict, best overall LG C5 OLED. With a 0.1 millisecond response time and perfect Goldilocks pricing, it's the untouchable choice for hardcore gamers and cinephiles. Best value TCL QM8K. It offers the most specs per dollar in the industry. Bright rooms, Sony Bravia 9. Its processing and glare-fighting brightness make it the king of daytime sports. Don't let Prime Day hype or catchy names sell you outdated tech. These vetted models are built to last.